The top class in the country this cycle and next. 4 5-stars, 18 4-stars, just racking up talent as Georgia does. So let's welcome in Ben Wolk of Dogs 24/7 to get us a little update on the status of Georgia recruiting coming off, what is that, win number 26 straight? Ben, they got it done of 5-star Ellis Robinson. He has been all over, though, not just Georgia. So where do the Bulldogs stand with the number 3 player in the class right now?
I think there was a big collective sigh of relief in Athens this weekend when Ellis Robinson returned to campus for a visit. His IMG Academy team had a week off. He had an opportunity to get to Athens. He's obviously been to a couple other visits, Miami most notably recently. And I think that there wasn't concern in Athens necessarily. I think that Georgia has felt pretty good about holding on to Ellis Robinson, but we know how crazy recruiting can get this time of year. And so anytime you've got a committed player that's been in the class for as long as Ellis has been, and he takes a visit somewhere else, it makes you raise your eyebrows a little bit. I think getting him back on campus this weekend, he got to spend some time with some of the other defensive backs that Georgia has committed, with DeMello Jones, with Andre Evans, who they recently flipped from LSU. And so because of that, I think Georgia has really positioned itself well to close out down the stretch with Ellis Robinson. Not to say that other teams like Miami aren't going to give their fights all the way up till National Signing Day, but I like where Georgia is right now coming off this visit.
Being 4-star wide receiver and NC State commit Terel Anderson took an official visit to Georgia this past weekend. He also did an unofficial visit against Kentucky. So there seems to be some smoke here. What are you hearing in regards to Anderson possibly flipping his commitment?
This was definitely one of the 2 or 3 more interesting visits that happened in Athens this past weekend. Like you mentioned, he's committed to North Carolina State right now. He took an unofficial visit to Georgia for the Kentucky game in October. He was back for his official visit over the weekend. He has not taken visits anywhere else up to this point. So as of right now, I would say that Georgia is the lone competitor to that North Carolina State commitment. I think that there was some buzz or possibility that he might flip that decision this weekend. That did not happen. All indications are that things are going to take their time with Terel Anderson leading up to National Signing Day. I think we'll talk about this a little bit more too, but there were other receivers on campus that Georgia had, and I think that Georgia is trying to figure out that position group right now. I know that Terel Anderson is a guy that Georgia really, really likes. They're recruiting him heavily. He is weighing his options with Georgia and North Carolina State, but as of right now, I think that North Carolina State, should feel good about where they're at right now, in that he has not flipped to Georgia. Do I think that they can just go away quietly and trust that they're going to sign him? I wouldn't say that necessarily. I just think that they have a little bit of time still to figure things out with Terel Anderson before he does switch that commitment.
It's hard to rule out the back-to-back national champs, but it sounds like from what you've said that they're the only flip candidate for Anderson. Meanwhile, 4-star athlete Kamron Mikell, a lot of candidates for him. It kind of sounds like maybe Tennessee and Colorado are in the driver's seat of this recruitment right now, but after this visit weekend, how's Georgia feeling about the in-state prospect?
Well, I think the really intriguing element of Cam Mikell's recruitment with Georgia specifically is Georgia was really the last school to start recruiting him as a wide receiver. He's been an athlete his entire recruitment. He plays quarterback for his high school. Georgia has really viewed him as a defensive back for most of his recruitment. Most of his communication has been with Will Muschamp and Fran Brown. So obviously Georgia has liked him on the defensive side of the ball. Meanwhile, most other schools have either recruited him both ways or exclusively as a wide receiver. And as his senior year is worn on, Cam Mikell has verbalized to all of these staffs, I would prefer to play wide receiver at the next level. And so I think getting him back on campus this weekend was really important because Georgia needed to have those conversations with him about, we do want you as a wide receiver. We have looked at you as a defensive back in the past, but you are someone that is such a talented athlete. We want you in this 2024 class. And so he spent a lot of time with Georgia wide receivers coach Brian McClendon over the weekend. I think that Cam Mikell, who will make his decision on Thanksgiving Day, November 23rd, he actually just put that out last night. I think that his decision and the fact that he's an in-state guy for Georgia at wide receiver probably plays a little bit into the Terel Anderson decision as well. And just, spots are tight this time of year, and I think Georgia has to figure out what's available and what's not still available at the wide receiver position in the 24 class.
Ben, let's look ahead to the class of 2025 as 3 of Georgia's top prospects were on campus. 4-star offensive tackle Juan Gaston, 4-star cornerback Jabari Antoine, and 4-star D lineman Jalen Wiggins. It's certainly early in the process, but you spoke to these guys. What did they have to say about being on campus at Georgia?
Well, in Juan Gaston's case, he's one of the top offensive tackle targets for Georgia in this cycle. He's an in-state guy, and pretty much everybody wants him. I think the most remarkable thing about him making this visit was this was not in his plans. He had a very specific schedule of games that he wanted to attend this year, and he was going to be at Georgia next weekend. He ended up scratching a Texas visit that he was going to take last weekend to go to the Georgia-Missouri game. That's obviously notable, and he does plan to be back in Athens this upcoming weekend for the Ole Miss game as well. So, again, really early for him, but as a guy that is being recruited as heavily as any offensive in the country, really important for Georgia to get him on campus once and likely twice in back-to-back weeks. With Jalen Wiggins, he's a defensive lineman from Tallahassee. The Florida schools are going to be major factors in this recruitment. Being from Tallahassee, you would think that Florida State might be the factor to land Jalen Wiggins, but he's a guy that Georgia really, really, really likes as a 5 technique defensive lineman in the 2025 class. He was on campus late into the night on Saturday night after the game, spending time with Trey Scott, spending time with Will Muschamp, Glenn Schumann, even got some time with Kirby Smart as well. He's someone that I think Georgia really, really likes. And again, too early to say whether I think Georgia will land Jalen Wiggins, but definitely someone that Georgia is in the mix for, and I suspect will land an official visit at some point next year. The last one on that, Jabari Antoine, he's a defensive back from Louisiana. We know how those go. It's really hard to pull them away from LSU, but Georgia's going to put up its fight to do so. Like with Jalen Wiggins, this is a guy that got on campus for the first time this season and spent a lot of time with Georgia coaches after the game. I believe he stayed overnight until Sunday as well with his family. He's going to put out a top 5 some point in December. Georgia's definitely going to be in that group when he does so. But again, whether or not Georgia's able to land him will probably be decided next summer when most of these guys end up taking their official visits in June.
I hate to ask you this because you just said it's too early with all of these guys, but I want to ask you about a 2026 prospect. Speaking of early, the number 6 player in that class, offensive tackle Jackson Cantwell. He is from Missouri, but was in Athens this weekend to watch both his hometown school and the Dogs. So what did he think of that experience?
Well, Jackson has a special place in my heart because both of us are from Nixa, Missouri, and not many people know where Nixa, Missouri even is. So him getting to Athens is huge because he's the number 6 overall player in the 2026 class. He's the number 2 offensive tackle. When you see him, it's pretty obvious why Georgia likes him. They have a type when it comes to offensive tackles, and it's just guys that are really, really big. As a sophomore in high school at 6'6", pushing 6'7", already pushing, over 300 pounds. He's a guy that Kirby Smart and Stacey Searles are really, really going to like. He camped with Georgia over the summer when he picked up his offer. This is his first game visit back, and he said that, he hasn't been to a ton of games yet, but it was as good as any game environment that he's been to this year. I know that's someone that Kirby Smart and Stacey Searles are going to be on very adamantly over the next 2 years, and someone that I expect Georgia to be very much in the mix for all the way throughout that recruitment.
Ben, I bet I can find somebody else at this desk that knows where Nixa, Missouri is. Carl, have you heard of it?
Oh, I definitely know about Nixa, Missouri, and everybody in the state of Missouri knows about Cantwell. Both his parents, Olympic-level throwers. Dad, I believe, was a silver medalist. Cantwell is also probably the number 1 thrower of the shot putting the discus in the nation. I think he has some Olympic potential there. So, Emily, it will be interesting to see what happens with his recruiting going down the stretch.
Certainly. He's getting started early and enjoying his visit to Georgia. We enjoy our visit with Ben. Thank you so much for being on the show. You can check out more of his work at Dogs 24/7 for all things Georgia, recruiting, football, analysis, all of it. Make sure you are locked in to dogs247.com.